I didn't think much of it at first. Just another hot Friday afternoon, the kind where the gravel crunches a little louder under your tires and the air smells like sunburnt dirt and old wood. I turned into my driveway. The same one my dad and I spread out by hand when I was barely tall enough to hold a shovel. And something felt off. Not broken, not obvious, just wrong. And then I saw it. Bright orange tape, stretched tight between wooden stakes, cutting across the mouth of my driveway like someone had drawn a line in the sand and decided, yeah, this is mine now. I slowed the truck, didn't even turn the engine off, just sat there staring for a second like my brain needed to catch up with what my eyes were already screaming. Because those weren't random markers. Those were survey stakes. Clean, precise, intentional. And they weren't on the edge of my land, they were right through it. I stepped out, boots hitting gravel, and followed the line like it was leading me somewhere, and it did. Straight across the property line, into my neighbor's yard. Now these neighbors? New money energy from day one. Moved in maybe 3 months ago, big black SUV, contractors in and out, landscaping crews every other day, the kind of people who don't wave back because they assume you work for them. And standing there, right by the stakes, was the guy running the show. Except his name wasn't Derek this time. Let's call him Nathan Cole. Mid-40s, crisp polo, sunglasses like he thought he was in a real estate commercial, and next to him, a surveyor with a clipboard, nodding like everything being said was gospel. I walked up slow, not aggressive, just direct. Hey, what's going on here? And Nathan didn't even hesitate. Didn't smile, didn't pretend, just pointed at the stakes like he was presenting a finished project. We're expanding our driveway, he said, calm as anything. And part of your gravel strip falls inside our boundary. So we're reclaiming it. Reclaiming. Like my property was some lost item at a train station. I actually laughed for a second. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd my brain needed a second to process it. That driveway's been here for over 2 decades, I said. Long before you even bought this place. He shrugged, actually shrugged, like history didn't matter. Boundaries change. Old records get corrected. It's just land. Just land. That's what people say when it's not theirs. I felt something shift in my chest right then. Not explosive anger. Not yet. More like a pressure building behind the ribs, the kind that tells you something's about to go very, very wrong. You might want to move your vehicles, he added, almost casually. Like he was reminding me trash day was tomorrow. We're pouring concrete Monday morning. And that was the moment. Not the stakes, not the claim, but the assumption. The assumption that I would just accept it. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. Just looked at him for a second longer than normal, nodded once, and turned back toward my house. Because here's the thing. I've learned that the loudest person in the argument usually loses. And Nathan? He was loud without even raising his voice. I walked back inside, shut the door, and let the silence hit me. Then the anger came. Not wild, not reckless, focused, sharp. The kind that doesn't make you swing fists, it makes you start thinking. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, something was scratching, an old memory, half forgotten, something the previous owner had mentioned when I bought this place. He'd said the property lines around here were messy. Something about a survey error decades ago, parcels drawn at weird angles, corrections that were never fully filed. At the time, I didn't care. Everything looked normal, everything functioned fine. But now that detail felt like a loaded weapon sitting on the table. So I went digging, pulled out every document I had. Deed, maps, old surveys, even the closing paperwork I hadn't touched in years. Spread it all across the kitchen table like I was building a case. Hours went by. Sun went down. I didn't even turn the lights on at first. Just sat there in the dim glow, tracing lines with my finger, comparing measurements, cross-checking notes. And then, I saw it. A thin strip, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, running horizontally across the very front of Nathan's property. It cut right through where his driveway sat. His mailbox, his carefully manicured lawn. And according to the original documentation, the one that actually mattered, that strip belonged to me. Not disputed, not shared. Mine. Completely. Legally. And the craziest part? It had never been reassigned. The county records still listed it under my parcel number because no one had ever filed the correction. Which meant, while Nathan was busy trying to reclaim a few feet of gravel from me, he had unknowingly built half his front access on land that wasn't his at all. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the map, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge. Not yet. But because I understood something Nathan didn't. This wasn't about who was louder, or richer, or more confident. This was about paperwork. And paperwork doesn't care how nice your house looks. It only cares what's written down. And if I played this right, this wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a lesson. Now let me pause the story for a second, because what Nathan was doing right there, that wasn't just arrogance. It was actually a pretty common play, especially in neighborhoods where property lines get blurry over time. According to standard procedure, if someone believes a boundary is incorrect, they don't just show up with stakes and start claiming land. There's a legal process. Surveys have to be filed, neighbors notified, sometimes even court involvement depending on the dispute. What Nathan did, that was more like skipping straight to the part where he assumes you won't push back. And honestly, that works more often than you'd think. From a legal perspective, land ownership isn't about who maintains it or who feels like it's theirs. It's about recorded deeds and what the county recognizes. If it's on paper under your name, it's yours, period. But here's where it gets interesting. This is also a psychological trap. When someone comes in confident, uses official-looking tools like survey stakes, maybe even throws around technical language, most people hesitate. They second-guess themselves. They think, wait, what if I'm wrong? And that hesitation, that's exactly what people like Nathan rely on. It's not just about land. It's about pressure, presence, and perceived authority. And in HOA-heavy areas, this kind of behavior gets amplified because people are used to rules being enforced externally. But in my case, there was no HOA stepping in. No committee, just two property owners, and a set of documents that hadn't been questioned in decades. And that's where the dynamic flips. Because the moment you stop reacting emotionally and start checking the actual records, the entire power balance changes. So once I saw that strip on the map, everything slowed down in my head, like the moment right before a storm actually hits, where the air gets heavy and quiet, and you just know something big is coming. I didn't rush over to Nathan's house, didn't start a shouting match across the fence. No, I did the exact opposite. I got organized. Next morning, I was up early, coffee barely touched, documents stacked in a folder like I was heading into court instead of the county office. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: confidence backed by paperwork hits a whole lot harder than confidence backed by attitude. I walked into the records office, that same faint smell of old paper and printer ink, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and slid everything across the counter to the clerk. She looked like she'd seen every kind of dispute imaginable, didn't react, didn't rush, just flipped through page after page, comparing maps, checking parcel numbers, and then she paused. Just for a second. That kind of pause that makes your heart beat a little louder. She looked up at me and said, "Well, this is interesting." Now, you never really know what interesting means in a place like that. It could be good, bad, or a whole new problem you didn't even see coming. But then she turned the screen slightly so I could see it, and there it was. That same narrow strip, highlighted under my name, active, unchanged, never reassigned. "This portion here," she said, tapping the screen lightly, "is still legally part of your parcel. No transfer has ever been recorded." I leaned in, just to be sure I wasn't imagining things. "So, that includes anything built on it?" She nodded. "If it sits on that strip, it's technically on your property." And just like that, the situation flipped completely. I thanked her, filed the paperwork to formally reaffirm the boundary. Because yeah, if you're going to play this game, you play it clean, and walked out of that building feeling calm. Not excited, not angry, just certain. 7 days. That's how long it took for everything to process. 7 days of Nathan probably thinking he'd already won, that his new driveway expansion was just a matter of time. I didn't interrupt him, didn't warn him, because honestly, he never gave me that courtesy. When the approval came through, stamped and official, I didn't celebrate. I made a call. Friday evening, just like the week before. But this time, I wasn't the one walking into a surprise. I hired a fencing crew. Not some rushed, half-done job either. I'm talking full privacy fence, solid wood, clean lines, professionally measured. And I gave them one instruction: build it exactly along the confirmed boundary. No more, no less. They showed up before sunrise the next morning. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand this time, as they unloaded materials, set posts, Worked with that quiet efficiency you only get from people who know exactly what they're doing. No drama, no noise, just construction. By the time the sun was fully up, the fence was standing. Tall, straight, unmistakable, and most importantly, perfectly legal. It cut straight across the front of Nathan's property, right through the section where his driveway connected to the road. His cars, parked inside. His access, completely blocked. I didn't have to wait long. His front door flew open like it had been kicked from the inside, and he came storming out, still in whatever he slept in, yelling my name like the fence might disappear if he shouted loud enough. "What the hell is this?" he yelled, walking straight up to the barrier like it had personally offended him. I took my time, set the coffee down, walked over. Not fast, not slow, just steady. "That," I said, tapping one of the posts lightly, "is my property line." He laughed. Actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You can't block my driveway." And that's when I pulled out the document. Not aggressively, not like I was winning an argument, just casually. "Oh," I said, holding it up so he could see the seal, "but I can." The shift in his face was immediate. You could see the moment the confidence cracked, when reality didn't match the version of events he'd already decided was true. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, running a hand through his hair, pacing now. "You're going to tear this down." I shook my head. "No, I'm not." He threatened lawyers. I told him he was welcome to try. He said he'd call the authorities. I told him that might be a good idea. And he did. About 30 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up, slow and deliberate, like they'd been here before. Because honestly, situations like this, they're not as rare as people think. The deputy stepped out, took one look at the fence, then at Nathan, who immediately launched into his version of the story. Fast, loud, full of confidence that was starting to sound a little forced. I didn't interrupt, just waited. When he finished, I handed over the paperwork. The deputy took his time, read through it carefully, walked the line, checked the markers, and then nodded. Not to Nathan, to me. "Everything here checks out," he said. Then he turned back to Nathan, and his tone shifted. Not rude, not aggressive, just final. "Sir, this fence is on his property. He's within his rights." You could feel the air change again, like the last bit of control Nathan thought he had just slipped right through his fingers. "So what? I just can't use my driveway now?" he asked, voice tighter than before. The deputy shrugged slightly. "You might want to move your vehicles before you lose access completely." That was it. No dramatic speech. No argument. Just reality, delivered plain and simple. Over the next week, things got expensive for Nathan. Contractors came back, this time not for upgrades, but for damage control. They started work on a new driveway on the opposite side of his house. Longer route, more materials, more labor. I'd see him sometimes, standing there, watching the progress with that same look I had the first day. Except now he understood exactly what was happening. And me? I didn't push it any further. I didn't extend the fence, didn't make it uglier than it needed to be. I just let it stand. Quiet. Solid. A reminder. And that strip of land he tried to take from me, I turned it into something simple. A small garden. A few trees, some flowers, nothing flashy. Just enough to make it clear, it was being used, it was being cared for, and most importantly, it wasn't going anywhere. Because in the end, this was never about revenge. Not really. It was about boundaries. The kind you don't cross unless you're ready for what's on the other side. So yeah, that's how it ended. No courtroom showdown, no dramatic apology, no handshake moment where we suddenly understood each other. Just a fence, a new driveway on the other side of his house, and a quiet kind of distance that settled in like it had always been there. And if you're expecting me to say I felt victorious? Honestly, not exactly. Satisfied, sure. But more than anything, I felt clear. Like I had just been reminded of something most people don't really think about until they're forced to. Boundaries aren't just physical lines on a map, they're tests. Tests of how far someone thinks they can push, and how willing you are to stand your ground when it actually matters. Because here's the thing, Nathan didn't start with the fence. He didn't even start with the concrete plan. He started with confidence, with presence, with that quiet assumption that if he acted like something was his, no one would question it. And for a lot of people, that works. People avoid conflict. They don't want the headache, the paperwork, the awkward tension with someone living 20 feet away. So they give a little, then a little more, and before they realize it, They've given up something that was never supposed to be negotiable in the first place. This is a psychological trap, and it's a subtle one. It doesn't feel like intimidation because there's no yelling, no threats, just certainty. And certainty, when it's performed well enough, can look a lot like authority. The lesson here is don't confuse someone's confidence with correctness. They're not the same thing, not even close. And from a legal perspective, this whole situation could have gone very differently if I had reacted the way most people instinctively do. If I had gone over there yelling, made it personal, escalated it into something emotional, I would have lost the only advantage I had, which was patience. Because property disputes, they're not won in the moment. They're won in records, in filings, in the quiet spaces where facts matter more than feelings. According to standard procedure, everything I did, checking documents, confirming with the county, formally reaffirming ownership, that's the path you're supposed to take. It's not flashy. It's not fast. But it's solid. And solid is what holds up when everything else starts to shake. Now, let's talk about something people don't like to admit. Sometimes, the person on the other side doesn't think they're the villain. Nathan probably believed what he was saying. Maybe his contractor told him the line was different. Maybe he saw an old survey and assumed it was correct. Or maybe, and this happens more than you'd think, he just trusted the version of reality that benefited him the most. That's human nature. We all do it in small ways. But the difference is, most of us don't act on it without checking. And that's where things cross the line, from mistake to overreach. So if you're ever in a situation like this, doesn't have to be land, could be anything where someone's pushing into your space. Pause before you react. Don't match their energy. Don't try to out-argue them in the moment. Step back, get your information straight, understand the system you're operating in. Because once you do that, the dynamic changes. You're no longer defending yourself. You're just standing on what's already yours. And there's a quiet kind of power in that. The kind that doesn't need to raise its voice. The kind that doesn't need permission. It just exists. And yeah, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Why not just talk it out? Why go straight to a fence? And that's fair. In a perfect world, that's exactly what you'd do. But respect goes both ways. And when someone skips that step, when they move straight into action without even giving you a conversation, they're telling you something. They're telling you how they see the situation. And more importantly, how they see you. At that point, it's not about being aggressive. It's about being clear. Clear in your actions, clear in your boundaries, clear in what you're willing and not willing to accept. Because if you're not clear, someone else will define those lines for you. And trust me, they won't draw them in your favor. So yeah, that fence, it wasn't just wood and nails. It was a line, a very literal one. And everything on my side of it stayed exactly where it belonged. Now I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have confronted him right there in the driveway? Tried to work it out? Or gone the same route I did, quiet, patient, and just a little bit surgical with the outcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you think. And if you've ever dealt with something like this, I'd actually love to hear how it played out for you. Because stories like this, they're never just about land. They're about people. And people, well, they always make things more complicated than they need to be.